Jason, how you doing, mate? You good?
I'm well, Sam. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. As I was saying prior to us pressing record, I've just done my first day where I feel like my shoulder's okay. I've had a terrible injury on my neck and shoulder. I saw the osteopath yesterday, so she's worked her magic. So touch wood and fingers crossed that I'm in a good place.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's always rotten when you do feel ill or you hurt yourself, but it's that nice reminder, isn't it, that health is really the most important thing.
100%. It's given me time to focus, realign myself, got me thinking about how I deal with stress, etc. Because running and exercise is my go-to way of dealing with stress. So not being able to do that is a nightmare for me. I'm like a caged animal. My wife's going mental. Like, I'm a nightmare. But it's taught me a lesson. It's learning about how to sit with myself and be still. So hasn't worked. I'm still a nightmare. Wife's still getting.
It's all a process, Sam. It's all a process.
Exactly. So Jason, thanks so much for joining me today on the Financial Planner Life podcast. So I just wanted to find out a little bit about your career, what you've been doing. Really interested in someone coming from Australia into the UK, how the two markets compare. And also a lot around what you're doing at the moment at Irwin Mitchel, because it's very, very interesting, the sector and the niche that you've managed to get yourself into. So that's really interesting as well. So Jason, so you obviously started your career off in Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
Just give us an overview of how you got into the financial planning, financial advice industry in Australia, and how really you then came over to the UK. What made you do it?
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess going way back, initially when I finished high school, my university placement was in a journalism degree. So that was kind of what I was planning to do initially. But it was one of those ones where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I kind of picked it because I got the best marks in English. That was my best subject. So I thought, all right, let's try journalism. But didn't have any burning desire to be doing that. So took a year off and did a bit of traveling and things as you do. And my deferred place to university came up, and I thought, it's just not for me. It's not. I don't want to go spending all that money on something that I'm not even sure that I want to be doing. So at the time, my parents actually owned a small financial planning firm, so a small IFA. And they said, well, look, whilst you're kind of thinking about what it is you actually do want to do, why don't you just come along and then do some kind of admin work for us and help us out? So did that, and I think it's a common theme through a lot of the podcasts that I've listened to from yourself is that a lot of people tend to kind of fall into the industry rather than seek it out. So that was definitely my entry into it. But as I got more involved in what was going on, moved more into a paraplanning role where I was doing a bit more complex stuff, started to do some exams and things, and it's just kind of snowballed from there, really. Once I'd been in the industry for a couple of years, it definitely was the advice kind of role that I wanted to be in. I didn't want to be the person at the computer all day banging out the reports. I wanted to be talking to people and chatting and that side of things. So it was always the plan to move into an advice role.
Yeah. Okay.
And I did a number of years, as I say, paraplanning back office, and then managed to get my first role with the bank. So the industry in Australia has a lot of parallels to the way it's worked here in the UK. So they've gone through an RDR equivalent called Future of Financial Advice Reforms. So same thing, banks were providing a lot of financial advice, training a lot of financial planners. And then the regulators came in and thought, ooh, geez, there's a lot of not so great stuff going on here. So I had a few really good years at the bank, but then basically they all started to get out of advice like they are here. So I learned a lot. It was fantastic. I felt like I was still providing great advice. I didn't see any dodgy stuff going on, but obviously it was happening out there. So off the back of that, moved into a smaller IFA firm. So again, very typical to what you see here. There was 4 advisors, small business, but providing really, really tailored advice to the client base.
All right, cool. Okay, so that sounds very, very similar setup to the UK, very similar in respect of what happened with RDR. So when you were working for the bank, how long were you working there as a financial advisor?
So I was an advisor there for just under 4 years, I think.
Okay.
And then I did, a couple of years as an advisor in the IFA firm before we decided to move to the UK.
Okay, cool. So what was the market like in Australia in respects of clients and giving financial advice? Was, are the general public, the consumer, are they quite aware of financial planning? Do they Is it financial planning, or is it financial advice, product sales? Obviously, going through something similar to RDR, I assume it was very product sales and commission based, and then financial planning may have followed on later, or has it always been there?
Again, it's actually quite amazing how closely the two countries have mirrored each other. So again, historically, financial planning was born from insurance sales. All the old financial planners were all insurance agents back in the day. And as time has gone on, it's become, just like here, less and less about product and more about advice. I think it's a really interesting question, because the availability of financial advice in Australia is much more widespread. So I think here in the UK, definitely my experience anyway, is that your typical IFA client skews a lot wealthier than it does in Australia. And for me, that comes back to the way the pension system is sort of set up. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here in the UK over the next 20, 30 years, because in Oz, there's a lot less, significantly fewer defined benefit pension funds out there. So what you've got instead is you've got a lot of clients who have just worked regular jobs. They're teachers, they're policemen, they're working at the supermarket. They don't have a final salary scheme, but they've got a really sizable pension pot. So I think I think financial advice is a lot more available because there's a lot more investable assets for your regular person in Australia. Right. And I think we're probably going to see a similar thing here as time goes on.
As in, more people have got bigger pension pots because they've set up personal pension plans as opposed to relying upon the state pension, or?
No. So I guess what I'm getting at with this, so let's say, a couple of weeks ago is a good example. I met with a client here who was, they're both teachers, right? And they've both been teachers. They're in their early 50s, both been teachers for a really long time. Husband is a head teacher now. So, earning pretty good money. They've got great final salary schemes. I think they're due to get around 45K between them. Once you add state pension onto that, they're quite well off. In Australia, that same couple wouldn't have a final salary scheme. Right. They would have a auto enrollment equivalent, and we've had auto enrollment in Australia since 1992. So that same couple would probably have £500,000 in an actual company pension scheme. And the company pension schemes run very similar to as a personal pension scheme would run here. So all of a sudden, here in the UK, that client, there's not a lot as a financial planner that we can provide in terms of value. There's not a lot of investable assets there, even though that person's actually going to be pretty well off in retirement. In Australia, that same person is going to have to manage that £500,000 through retirement. So obviously there's a lot of value then that we can add as financial planners. There's a lot more strategy you can put in place. And I think that's just going to be an interesting shift, because people who are now in their 30s, they're not going to have final salary schemes in the vast majority of cases. They're going to have their company or their own personal pensions or auto enrollment schemes that are potentially going to be worth quite a lot of money when they get to their 60s.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, that's very interesting. So you spent your time over in Australia. You worked yourself up as an IFA administrator, power planner, typical route. Actually, interestingly, from there, you then moved into financial advice within a bank. The changes to the regulation happened over there, similar to RDR in the UK. Did you then leave the bank to come to the UK, or so how did that work? And what was the reason why you left Australia and came to the UK? Because I get approached a lot by people who have come from Australia, in Australia or perhaps in South Africa, want to come to the UK, obviously struggle with visas and struggle with finding employment. I mean, they ask us and we can't really help because clients of ours won't take anybody on outside of the UK. Obvious reasons, things like visas, but also qualifications and lack of experience of working within the UK market. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about that transition. But how did it come that you ended up moving to the UK?
Yeah, so like I say, I was working as an IFA, and my wife is from the UK originally. So I'd been working as an IFA for a couple of years, as in a small independent firm. And my son was born, and he actually had quite a lot of complex medical issues. So he's got cerebral palsy and epilepsy. So as you can imagine, that kind of throws your world upside down. You have this image of having a healthy child, and my wife was a teacher, so she planned to go back to work. And then all of a sudden, all these plans kind of can't go ahead as you'd expected. So because my wife's from the UK originally, she's got a really big family, big supportive family unit here in Manchester. So we just decided that, you know, on balance, it was going to be better for us to have that family support here, just to be able to assist with my son and just provide that support, I suppose.
How old's your son then?
He's 5 now, just turned 5. So
he's 5. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you recognised he had cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and other health problems, was it instant? Did you know that straight away, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell a whole story about that. It was a pretty traumatic kind of situation, really. It was when he was 3 days old. I won't go into the huge story, but basically he had low blood sugar. His body didn't work the way it was supposed to be working. He didn't shift to using his fat stores. You know, we talk about the keto diet. You know,
Yeah.
you've probably heard of that. So normally, basically, what that is when your body gets a bit low on blood glucose, if you don't have enough food in your body, you switch to ketones. Jack wasn't feeding very well when he was an infant, which a lot of kids don't. You know, often they lose a little bit of weight as they're learning how to feed and stuff like that. But it's fine because they switch to using fat stores. So that process didn't happen properly for Jack. So basically, he suffered a brain injury as a result of that. So it was our first 3 weeks as new parents was in the neonatal intensive care unit. So
Crikey,
it was it wasn't expected, obviously, and it was it was awful.
Crikey, yeah, that's going. Obviously, I've got a little daughter myself, and I mean, going through anything like that must have been quite traumatic. So I couldn't imagine, actually. But so you decided then that UK, big family over here, wife's from the UK, looking for that balance, really. I guess you're looking to be able to work. You're looking to be able to look after your son in the way that he needs to be looked after, and having that larger family around would be a better move for you. So off you came to the UK then. Be interesting to talk about that work-life balance, actually, and how you've managed that, because, you know, throughout my time of working in recruitment, I've represented candidates that have been in exactly similar situations, whether it's a child or a partner that's unwell and needs full-time care or part-time care. And some of the stories I've heard along the way, it's been really difficult for them to actually find employment with a firm that actually understand and give them the flexibility. And I think the shift is changing massively, you know, even for like mums. You know, we look at like people turn their noses at hiring mums because they've got to go pick the kids up and all that. And it's just crazy. And I think the shift has changed. And I think it's been brought forward even faster with COVID, you know, and people understanding you can be flexible and can work. So work-life balance is a biggie, you know, it's a biggie. So be interested to hear a little bit more about that. And thanks for sharing that. So you're in the UK. So you've come to the UK. Now, did you find a job before you came to the UK? Did you reach out to recruitment consultants? What did you do to get yourself a job in the UK? Because you must have been coming over here thinking, shit, I got to find a job.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the first thing was, it's probably tough for somebody who doesn't have that kind of trigger to move like we did. But I think, you know, I kind of realized after doing some research, I did reach out to a couple of recruitment agents just to get a bit of the lay of the land, I suppose, beforehand. And I kind of realized that I was going to have to put the ego at the door and kind of take a step back in my career, which is tough, you know, especially with the kind of personalities that us advisors generally are. It can be tough to say, okay, I'm going to have to go back and take a step back in my career in order to take that step forward. So
let's stop there. Let's stop there. Yeah. Leaving that ego at the door. Okay. Do you think you needed to say, do you now where you are now being a financial planner in the UK, do you think at the time you did need to put your ego at the door? Do you think you did need to start perhaps in a position that was lower than a financial planner? Or do you think it was just a lack of understanding from employers?
I think I could have made it work. You know, we're all great at working with the information we've got at the time. I don't know how good that would have been from a client's perspective. You know, I think I could have made it work. I don't think I would have been ready. You know, I think I definitely underestimated that learning curve. Right. And I think part of it is actually, you know, I've talked a lot about the similarities between the UK system and the way it works in Australia. And so, you know, when I started doing my research, I was looking at the way pension schemes work here, you know, some of the tax rules, and it all looks very similar. And you kind of look at that and say, yeah, that's fine, not a problem, I can deal with that. But I guess it sounds obvious in hindsight, but what you forget is that when you're a financial planner sitting down with someone, you're not talking to them just about what the rules and regulations are today. You're talking to people who are 55 years old who have a scheme from back in 1987. Well, over that time, the UK has gone through so many different iterations, especially with, the contracting out and the way those changes have happened with state pensions. So it's all that kind of stuff that I honestly would have been really flailing if I tried to just jump straight in and start as a financial planner. So, as much as it is taking a step back, it's made me a much better planner now because I've had that kind of, it's accelerated because you understand how investments work, you understand the financial planning process, but it's made me a much better financial planner now.
Okay, cool. Well, that's really good advice. So if anyone's sort of outside the UK that's thinking about coming into the UK, I suppose from your experience of coming in and then looking at trying to get employed as a financial planner is to leave your ego at the door. The reality is there is a lot of learning that you have to do before you can become a financial planner in the UK. I mean, the qualifications you held in Australia aren't transferable to the UK, are they?
No.
So what about the qualifications? Did you have any UK ones before you left Australia? Could you use any of your were they redundant, completely redundant?
Yeah. So I guess to answer that in combination with your other question. So we came and had a visit sort of, I think it was 7-8 months before we planned to actually move, just to kind of, again, suss out what the situation was. I wanted to speak to a couple of potential employers, look at what houses would cost, all that sort of stuff. So I managed to secure a role at that point, a paraplanning role, without having had any qualifications or anything like that. I think, like anything, it probably would have been even easier if you'd had a couple of units of your diploma under your belt. Yep. But you're exactly right. So in Australia, I was the equivalent of a chartered financial planner. I'd just completed a Masters of Applied Finance, came over here, sent all that to the CII, and they said, well, we'll give you 30 advanced credits.
Right.
Okay. Great. So that's 8 years of study that just basically count for nothing. So yeah, it's and again, in hindsight, I can actually understand where they're coming from with that, because the content is a lot more different than it appears on face value.
Is it is the content different from the Australian? So you said you're the equivalent of chartered over in Australia, and you're working towards chartered at the moment, aren't you, in the UK? Yeah. How different is the qualification and the learning to the Australian markets? Is it harder, or is it easier, or is it similar?
I guess it depends on your learning style. I think in Australia, the vast majority, it's the same. So you have your diploma level, which is your base standard that you need to be registered as a financial advisor. But just like here, that's quickly becoming kind of a minimum standard, really, rather than the actual standard. And then you have your advanced diploma, which gets you to that kind of chartered level equivalent. I guess for me personally, as a learner, a lot of the study over there is what's the word I'm looking for? It's not exam, it's coursework. It's coursework based. Yeah. So for me, I hate exams. I'm not great in exams. So for me, that's a big shift, because there's a lot more kind of pressure on getting everything ready for that 3 hours that you have to do here. So for me personally, I found it more difficult here just because of the way that the education is set up.
Okay.
But I think, content-wise, it's probably not too far apart.
Not too far apart, but more sort of coursework based over in Australia, which suited you more in your learning style because you're not so much of an exam taker. Yeah. So what route did you go down when you came to the UK, and how did you make that decision?
So in terms of education, so I got the role without having anything. Obviously I had a lot to sort of hang my hat on in terms of Australian qualifications, and that language kind of transfers. So when an employer is looking that you've got a diploma and an advanced diploma and a master's degree, they know what that means. It's not completely foreign. Yep. So the company I work for, they did all their education through CII. So yep. They're obviously the behemoth in the industry. So I didn't have any problems with that. So that's kind of the route I've gone down.
Okay, cool. So you went down the CII, which is quite heavily exam based, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. Unfortunately.
Yeah, because I always have this sort of, if I was to consider becoming a financial planner, and doing the qualifications, I think I would go down the LIBF route myself.
Yeah.
I think I've just put a guide together, purely based around sort of the CISI, LIBF, and the CII. But I did a guide quite recently around the costings as well, the costings associated to all of them. And the LIBF comes out, to me, it comes out cheaper. It's quicker to pass.
Yeah.
And there's no exams. So to me, it's like, well, that just makes total sense. I would do that. But I think what you said there is that when you're coming into the UK, the sort of badge of honor that people say that you should have is the CII. They've got a bit of a stranglehold on qualifications and people saying that that's the right route to go down. I personally would go down the LIBF, but it's just interesting because I would struggle with the exams, I think. And years ago, they had like FPCs in the UK, and I did FPC 1. And I remember it was difficult at the time because I'm not a very exam driven individual. Cool. So
what do you think about, just quickly, what do you think about CISI? Because I know, so they've got the CFP certification, which is, it's like America and Australia in terms of the CFP is kind of like the gold standard. What do you think about that? That's new and kind of developing.
Yeah, it's new and developing. But what I've heard is they're not putting a great deal of energy and effort into the CFP supporting advisors, and getting it out there for that to be recognised as an industry standard up against the charters for CII. So I think I think people that have taken that route, I'm not saying that it's a bad route to go down, but from my perspective, looking out at the industry as a whole, it's not really something that a lot of financial advisors do. It tends to be CII, that tends to be that route. But yeah, the chart, the CFP one, what I'm hearing is they're not putting a great deal of energy and effort into it and promoting it as a qualification, as an accreditation. So if an advisor does it, it's kind of like, well, what's that?
Yeah.
But it's a funny one, qualifications, I think. It's like, if you're level 4 qualified, if you're qualified to give financial advice and your job title says you're a financial advisor or a financial planner, I think ultimately it comes down to the client. So the client doesn't really sit there and go, oh, let's have a quick look at the CISI qualification route, CII qualification, LIBF. They don't care, do they?
No.
I don't think they genuinely care. So that's my point. It's like, well, do the qualification to get yourself level 4. And actually, probably what's more important is the soft skills. It's how you deliver yourself as a financial planner. It's how you question the client. It's how you get the best out of that relationship. It's the financial coaching aspect of it. And there's people out there like the Kinder industry, or you've got Know Thyself Academy, all these different academies, Catherine Morgan, doing life coaching, all those types of things. I think they're the things that get you, recognized as a financial planner. The qualification is it's a tick box. But I get shot for that. I say that to some people who are chartered and absolutely, qualifications all the way. They just think, shut up, Sam, what are you talking about? But as a profession that's trying to attract new people to come in and become financial planners, why put so many crazy barriers up to entry? Make it make it bloody easy for them to come in.
I mean, I've seen that with a number of ex-colleagues, is that they're paraplanning, they want to become an advisor, but they want to get chartered first. And my advice was, work towards chartered. It's obviously good to have it. It's important to get those qualifications, but that's not going to make you a better financial planner.
No,
you're going to learn those things as you go on. And I think sometimes when you talk about soft skills, like you just mentioned, that kind of can be stigmatized a little bit, that like, oh, you want me to work on my sales skills, right? And that's it. But I think it's looking at that the wrong way. All that by improving your soft skills, it means you're going to be able to get more from that client. You're going to be able to understand more what it is that they're trying to achieve. You're going to be able to get them to talk to you more, get them to open up more. And actually, that doesn't then flow through to you being more likely to make a sale. It flows through to you being able to provide better advice because you know that person better. So I think, you're exactly right. I think soft skills that can be vastly underrated.
I think so. Otherwise, it's too heavy on the exams. It's too heavy on the exams and not enough on the actual person or the people you're talking to, and the psychology of what you're delivering and unearthing the problems and fixing problems. And I love all the approach now to financial planning, which is more coaching based. I like that idea. I think we as consumers need things simplified. I think we need things simplified, and we need someone to listen to us and attach our emotions to it, because, I think there's a lot of fear that goes with money. There's a lot of worry, anxiety, pride. I find it very difficult to talk about money, but if I've got someone in front of me who understands that, then they can draw it out of me and make me feel less anxious. Then I'm probably going to share because, you know, especially like being a business owner, for example. I'm a business owner. I've got, you know, hire 15 guys. I've been running a business for ages. Does that mean I'm amazing with money? No, it doesn't, you
Yeah.
know? So I kind of need someone that can draw that out of me. Otherwise I'm an egotist. I can be an egotistical git as well and get all prideful and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
So that, have you done any financial coaching courses? Have you sort of had any external training outside of what you do on a daily basis?
I've not, you know, and I have seen Catherine's Catherine's stuff on social media. She's obviously pretty active as well. So, you know, it's definitely, I think it's one of those areas where you can never learn enough. So, you know, at the moment, obviously with being 3 years into being in the UK, it's kind of like there's so much that I could be going at. So, it's all added to the list, and it is always a learning journey. I don't think in financial planning and in a lot of professions you could ever say, I'm done, I don't need to learn anything else. You know, there's always going to be more areas you can improve on out there.
Okay, so you came into the UK, you started yourself as a power planner. Okay. How long were you doing that for?
A couple of years.
Okay. So a couple of years in power planning role. And were you, as a power planner in the UK, were you purely research based, you know, behind the computer typing away, or were you getting yourself in front of clients as well and building upon those skills of the skills you already had, but, you know, evidencing and building those the skills on a face-to-face basis?
Yeah, so the way that worked where I worked at the time was we would be in with all the meetings with the advisor, with the client. So there's a lot of client face time. I think, you know, I mentioned about leaving the ego at the door, and that I kind of had to do that for 2 years straight, because I'd be sitting in a meeting, and especially as I started to get more comfortable with how the system works here, you know, I'd be sitting there, the advisor would say something, and I think, well, I wouldn't say like that. But you know, you can't be piping up and putting your 2 cents in, so to speak. So, you know, I think if nothing else, it was a great learn for me in terms of the confidence side of things. So, you know, sitting with actual advisors who are doing the job here, you really get to see the kind of stuff they're talking about, the kind of things that they're doing. And again, you realize that actually, as much as the nuts and bolts of a financial strategy are different between the countries, the process of dealing with people and the process of doing the financial coaching and the financial planning is the same. You know, people are the same all over the world. They all have the same aspirations. They've all got the same concerns, and taking them through that journey of becoming more comfortable with money is very similar no matter where you are in the world, really.
Cool. So in financial planning, there's a route, isn't there? There's even go in as a trainee financial advisor. And what you're seeing in the UK are these academies opening up, you know, so you've got Quilter, you've got St. James's Place, the Open Work Academy. And what they're saying is, if you've got some of the qualifications, if you've got none of the qualifications, or if you want to change over from being a IT salesperson and you want to move into financial planning, you can do that. So they're trying to kind of bridge that gap to get more people coming into the financial advice profession. But what they're doing is they're saying, come on in and then go straight into financial advice. You know, you've got the other route, which is the more traditional route, which is the coming in as an IFA administrator, going down the power planner route and kind of earning your stripes and working your way up to financial advisor. What do you think about that? Do you think that somebody can just walk straight into financial planning and become a financial planner straight away? Or do you think it's wise and beneficial to go down the route of IFA administrator, power planner, then financial advisor?
So personally, if I had my time again, I would still take the power planner route. I just think it allows you to have exposure to a lot of stuff that potentially you're not going to get exposure to for many years if you go straight in as a financial planner. With that said, I think there's nothing wrong with going straight in as a financial advisor, but I think it would be really important, again, if it was me doing it, looking how that process was run, how that academy was run, what your expectations would be. You know, I think if you're going to be kind of thrown into the lion's den and expected to be writing big business right off the bat, I think that's a recipe for burnout, and, you know, you're not necessarily going to be enjoying yourself. If on the other hand, it's going to be sort of, you know, shadowing other advisors, maybe working with them on bits of business that are maybe too small for them to be dealing with, or straight risk clients or whatever, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that route. I guess it would just come down to how that, I think the important part for both sides is that as long as there's that kind of stepped approach. So, you know, you can start with the more simple stuff and build your way up, because I think that is really important.
Simple stuff, build your way up. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay, cool. So you're working as a power planner and you obviously left. Yeah. Because you're now working for Irwin Mitchel, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, it was a constant ego check for two long years. So I itching to get back in the advisor seat. So joined Irwin Mitchel at the start of this year, so 6th of January. Obviously had a couple of months of normal office life.
Yeah.
Before ending up here, but it's been brilliant. Been really enjoying being back in the driver's seat, so to speak.
Great stuff. Because my understanding with Irwin Mitchell is that they do a lot of, they're solicitors, aren't they? Irwin Mitchell.
Yeah.
So they've got a solicitor side, which is the bulk of their business. And then they built the financial planning side on the back of the solicitor business. And when I was working with Irwin Mitchell, it was on the clinical negligence and personal injury specialist side. So financial planners that were giving advice to clients that have suffered clinical negligence or personal injury. Is that the area you're currently working on at the moment?
Yeah, so actually, funnily enough, I've just remembered, I think it might have even been you guys that placed me there, Mitchell, Andrew Nicholson.
Andrew Nicholson, yes, it was us. Look at that.
Yeah.
Recruit UK. Anybody listening, come and see us because we place candidates and they end up on the podcast. I forget who we place. We place so many.
Yeah, exactly. So you're exactly right. It was recruited to be the PI side of the business. So it was funny actually because Andrew was speaking to me about a number of different roles that it didn't really sound like me. They were kind of your typical IFA role. And at the time, I was looking for something a little bit different within the industry. I think everything that I've gone through with my son, I really had that kind of feeling that I wanted to be really feeling like I was helping people. So I was kind of looking for something a little bit different than your typical IFA route, I suppose. And Andrew actually mentioned the role that I've got now, and I think they'd pretty much filled it. But I guess it was funny because it happened to come up about my son, and obviously, having a child with a disability, there's so much crossover then if you're dealing with clients who are in personal injury and medical negligence, because obviously a huge portion of that client base have disabilities. That's why they're getting those payouts. So he ended up speaking to who's my boss now, and got me in with an interview. I think it was on the Tuesday, and in Sheffield. So I went across from Manchester over to Sheffield. Got me in for a second interview the Thursday, and then on my drive home, I got offered the job. So it was like, it happened super quick. And it just really ticked a lot of boxes for me because of that personal injury side. So you're still getting to deal with some really big money. You're getting to do some really interesting stuff from a strategy perspective. But my clients are people who really need financial advice. They're not just looking to save a bit of inheritance tax or work out how to pass their millions onto their kids properly. It's people that if this money is not managed properly, they will run out and they need £200,000 to pay for their care each year. So that was what I came on the business to do. Still very much doing that. Just kind of recently, the last few months, the Irwin Mitchel financial planning division, we've sort of expanded into private wealth. So, working more closely with the solicitors in the family team, or tax trust and estates, people who are doing wills, stuff like that. So kind of doing a hybrid role now where I've got a lot of ongoing clients in the PI side of the business, and also sort of starting to build up the wealth side of the business as well.
So, okay, brilliant. Let's kind of delve a bit deeper on it then, because I think within financial planning in the UK, there are different niches. There are certain areas you can work in. And this is one that people don't come across that often, which is clinical negligence and personal injury. Now, for those that don't really understand what that actually is, it would be great for you to give us a bit of an overview of what clinical negligence and personal injury financial planning is there for. Why is it there? How does it support the clients?
Yeah, so I guess the really broad umbrella is personal injury, and within personal injury, you can have people who have been the victim of car accidents where somebody else was at fault. You can have medical negligence. Maybe a baby was delivered incorrectly, and then that has caused them to have a brain injury, something like that. All sorts of operations that have gone wrong. Sort of anything where there is potentially a party at fault, the solicitors will then seek to seek damages for that. So that can be huge amounts of money. So let's use an example of a child where the birth hasn't gone correctly. They've suffered a brain injury. that child may have very complex disability needs. They may need to have a 2-to-1 carer, so they may need 2 carers with them for the rest of their life. Now, on top of things like wheelchairs and adapted housing and stuff like that, basically what the settlement will be looking to achieve is enough money to pay 2 full-time carers 24 hours a day for the rest of that child's life. So, it doesn't take, you're going to need a calculator to work out how much money that ends up being. So some of these settlements can be really significant. And obviously, like anybody with significant amounts of money, you need to make sure that that's managed properly. And for someone with a disability, that is incredibly important, because if you've got a client or a claimant who's got a life expectancy to age 55, and that money runs out when they're 47, it's not like they can just start shopping at Lidl instead of Tesco. That care need doesn't change. So it's really, really important that the money is managed properly, the tax position's managed properly. And often you're talking about, like I say, really serious sums of money. So it needs to get quite complex, especially around the tax planning.
And also you're dealing with a very highly sensitive situation, aren't you? Quite emotional, probably. As you said, your experience with your boy being unwell at a very young age has probably helped you have that empathy and understanding of what someone might be going through emotionally through the courts, for example, because it's not as simple as someone saying, okay, so there's been some negligence there, so what we're going to do is write you a check for £1 million. Here's that, stick it in your bank account. That's going to last you forever. So from a clinical negligence and PI advice perspective, I assume you're working alongside the solicitor to say, look, this is the financial plan. This is what we can do with that money to make sure that that individual is covered for the rest of their life. And I suppose it's like it's taking into consideration everything, isn't it? So it's how many carers is that person going to need? How old is that person's parents now? Are they going to be around? Inflation, cars, travel, food, absolutely everything, because that individual's life has been turned upside down. And so you've got to be, it's such an important role, isn't it, to work out the financial need of that person. You're almost playing a bit of a guessing game as well, aren't you? Obviously not guessing, but you're making an informed decision as to how much money that person's going to need. So what happens there? So you go in, do you sit in the courts? Are you involved in the court proceedings? Do you have to present to the court why you think that person needs a specific sum of money? Are you then involved in the claim itself?
Yeah, so we definitely get involved pre-settlement. So that's the period before the money's actually been paid or an agreement has been made. So I don't do that personally. Obviously, I'm still quite new to the whole thing, but we have what's called expert witnesses. Yep. So there's financial planners in our firm. We have one, my colleague Phil in Manchester, who's their expert witness. So in terms of quantum, which is the amount of money that's being sought, we don't really get involved in that. Where we do get involved is looking at what is going to be the best option for the client in terms of how that money is paid. Right. So often a settlement can be made in one of 2 ways. It's what's called a periodical payment order, which is an amount that gets paid every year. So it's 200 grand a year, for example, or lump sum. Now, obviously, there's going to be different parts of that claim where one or the other is going to be more appropriate. So if you're talking about care, probably a PPO, an annual payment is going to be a better option for that. But if you're talking about money to provide for adapted housing, things like that, then lump sum is going to be appropriate. So we get involved with working out and providing reports on how we would recommend the split happens between ongoing income and lump sum payment. After the settlement's made, it's a really interesting one, because you don't just have a client sitting in front of you and you talk to them about their wishes. Sometimes the client might not be able, well, often the client's not able to speak for themselves. So you would have their parents, if relevant. You would have, if the client doesn't have capacity, they'll be under the court of protection. So you'll have the solicitors from the court of protection. If there's a personal injury trust, you might have additional trustees. So we can have an annual review where there's 9 people in the room. Okay, yeah. You might have the client's case manager, who is the person who kind of coordinates all of their care and coordinates their physio and stuff like that. So there can be a lot of different dynamics at play, but it's just it can be really heartwarming, because you're sitting in the client's house, obviously pre-COVID. You're all sitting around the client's house. You've got the disabled party, the claimant in the room, and you kind of got this big group of people, and we're all there to make sure that this person has the best life they can possibly have. So it is a really rewarding feeling.
That sounds really rewarding. Very different from your traditional financial planning, financial advice,
Yeah.
going out there trying to make people money, trying to, get them richer or whatever it might well
Exactly.
be. That's the kind of view people tend to have of financial planners, isn't it? Whereas this is
Yeah.
actually genuinely trying to make somebody's life better.
Mm.
Obviously, people are doing that within financial planning as well, but it is trying to make somebody's life better who's at a massive disadvantage to the average person out there in the UK.
Yeah. And,
Very
you mentioned
interesting.
before about the specifics. And I think, again, you get really specific. If they need new windows, they're telling you about the new windows. If the chair needs some new wheels, you're talking about, how much that's all going to cost. So you become a lot, the solicitors are a big part of that as well, but you become a lot more involved in that just basic money management type stuff, budgeting for things that are going to come up over the next few years.
In this role, then, have you learned things that you've never learned within a financial planning position previously?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I think the financial planning side is very much the same, because at the end of all this, you have a lump sum of money you're investing for that client. So, in a lot of ways, that side of things is very similar to an IFA. But the legal world is just a beast in and unto itself. There's so much jargon. There's so much kind of protocol and things that you've got to sort of understand how it works. But it's a lot to learn, but it's all incredibly interesting stuff.
No, I think it's really great, and I'm the amount. We've done, like I said, we've done a bit of work with a number of different companies that deal with the PI and clinical negligence space, and it was always very interesting, and it was always very interesting to talk to the financial planners who were in the business, because it did just feel so different. Now, there was a qualification, I think it's step qualification, step accreditation, which some advisors do within that space as well. Is that something you're doing or thinking about doing, or do you need to have the step qualification to do the role itself?
No, you don't. I think there's a lot of education around trusts that you do through the sort of standard, the chartered kind of route and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm focusing on for the time being. I think it's definitely, the step's definitely something to consider for sure. I guess the difference that we've got with maybe some of the other firms that are in this space is that I work for the law firm. So, at the end, all I have to do is jump on the company directory, and there's 500 solicitors that I can ask questions about trusts and things too. So, we've got some huge resources within the firm there to be making sure that any advice we're giving, we don't tend to just be giving it ourselves. We are giving it ourselves, but we bring a lot of those other members of the company into the process as well.
So when the money's actually paid out, so let's say I've had an injury, I've gone through the courts, and the money's being paid. So you've established that Sam needs this much money. Can I sort of say, well, I don't want it paid that way. I just want everything in a lump sum, and I'm going to walk away and spend all my I'm going to manage my money myself? Or do they have to engage with an expert financial planner and receive that income on a monthly, yearly basis? Does that make sense? Can I, as a client, just do it myself?
I don't know about technically whether you can or not. It's like anything. It's like if you're turning up to court for any kind of crime or any issue, you can represent yourself. Whether that's a good idea or not is another question. But generally, the solicitors who are litigating these claims will sometimes have worked with the family and worked with the client for years, 5-10 years plus. So kind of over that time frame, you can imagine the family becomes incredibly trusting of those solicitors, and it's just a long process that works out what is going to be best for that disabled person. So I think almost once you kind of get to the end of that road, the question's been answered so many times through the various reports and things like that I've not really heard of any kind of conflict, I guess, between the claimant wanting something different than what is being recommended to them. I think the other thing as well to keep in mind is that for kind of smaller value claims, anything kind of under £500,000 really, you're probably not going to be looking at PPOs as much. It's more where there is going to be a really high level of care need, and often it's not like it's almost all of the ones that I've seen, it's never that you're getting paid only an income and no money. It might be that you're getting 100,000 as a periodical payment, and then you're getting a £5 million settlement. It's not often that you're going to get 500,000 as an ongoing payment and nothing as a lump sum. That would be really, really unusual. It's normally a combination.
God, there's so much that I just baffles my mind, because there's so much to take in to be a financial, to predict really what that person's life was going to be like.
Yeah.
To say,
I mean, some of the reports we get done, and we do a big part of this as well, is just is looking at those projected costs, and it's incredible the detail they get down to. They get down to like holidays. What's your annual holidays going to be? Because it's not just about providing for this person for the bare minimum. It's about the fact that they shouldn't be in this situation. How do we best replicate the life that they would have had anyway, with a financial
with money
with money? Yeah. So it's like if you or I wanted to go on a family holiday to Portugal, we go on booking.com, we'd find a hotel, boom, done, couple of grand, whatever. If this person wants to go on holiday, they're going to need to take 2 carers with them. They're going to need to probably fly, if not business first class, because they've got chairs and things, they can't actually fit them and their equipment. Once they're there, they're going to have to probably have a suite or something, not because they just want to be ballers, but because they can't enter the regular sort of room. So everything becomes a lot more expensive, and they really do get into that granular level of detail. 2 holidays per year will cost roughly X. Project that out until age 60. That's an extra amount added to the settlement, and it's important because
Does it also take into consideration, so let's say, for example, it's a child, and the child hasn't had the ability to obviously raise a family and possibly have had that opportunity taken away from them. Does it take into consideration sort of life events that individual might well miss out on as well, that you can't really put a monetary figure on it, because is there a way to take that into consideration? So if I was 4 years old and I had a really bad injury and it wasn't my fault, I couldn't have children, for example, or even care for my children if I did have them. Is it taken into consideration, and how do they do that?
No, as far as I'm aware, no, it's not really. And actually, it's quite unfortunate, because you get some circumstances where where the payout doesn't match the emotional distress that family's gone through, because sometimes it would be that if there's no financial damages that can be attributed to that negligence, they don't give you they don't give you a sum, because it's an awful thing that's happened to you. So yeah, it's really tough. Some of the ones that come through, and a one that comes up often is a mesothelioma claims, like asbestos related claims. So that person could have been sick for a really long time, and it's an awful way to go, but because they've only got 2 years worth of life expectancy left, the claim is only payable for 2 years worth of their costs. So actually the claim amounts are small, and yet that family's lost their parent or their grandparent or whatever. So it can be really tough, because sometimes you look at it and you think that's just not fair, but unfortunately it does come down to the pounds and pence at the end of the day. So
it sounds to me like you've kind of landed in a role which is really quite interesting. So it's not just financial planning, but it's just such an interesting side to it as well. And you mentioned that Irwin Mitchel also doing moving into the space of like wealth management with existing clients under the solicitor's side, so getting in with families and doing that type of thing. So is your job split between the two then? Do you get involved in the clinical negligence PI side and also the wealth management of families underneath Irwin Mitchel?
That's right. Yeah. So that's fairly recent. It's an area where there's a huge potential within the firm, obviously, and we're just at the kind of the building relationship stage at the moment. So getting to know the solicitors in the family team, tax trusts and estates. There's obviously so much advice you can be providing those sorts of people. I know a lot of IFAs deal with people going through divorces, because often they are going to be receiving a lump sum, pension sharing orders, stuff like that. There's a lot of issues where us as financial planners can assist as well.
And are you sort of typically dealing with quite large sums of money, or do you tend to find that it's, when you're at the bank, for example, it might be somebody with a 50 grand bond or something like that. Irwin Mitchel, does it tend to be high net worth or ultra high net worth clients that you would be seeing?
It's a real mix, to be honest. On the wealth side of the business, there's obviously a lot of people who I see who are very wealthy individuals. But then again, even people who don't have a lot of money, if they're getting divorced, they need a solicitor a lot of the time. So there's a lot of people that come through the firm who aren't necessarily financial planning clients. But I'm really lucky, I guess, in that I've got a lot of leeway from the business to try and help those people as much as we can. So, you know, a lot of my day is spent speaking to people who aren't going to become clients of asset management, but you're just helping them out with, you know, should I put my money in S&I, talking about financial services compensation scheme, you know, just stuff like that, giving them a little bit of information to kind of help them out without expecting them to actually be investing anything with us.
And this is the gap that's kind of missing, and it's starting to come to fruition now, which is this coaching side, isn't it? So you've got the financial planning side, which is like, I'm going to write a financial plan for you, cash flow forecast, you've got a nice lump sum of money, blah, 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 blah. But not everybody can really afford financial planning or are suitable for financial planning. Some just want to be given a bit of coaching, given a bit of advice around what to do without the actual full financial planning piece. So is that so Irwin Mitchel, they're sort of allowing you to sort of bridge that gap at the moment with some of the clients that they have that might not fit the wealth proposition?
Yeah, it's not a formal thing by any means, and there's no kind of fees involved for it.
No.
I think really it comes from the DNA of the business of being in PI. And, you know, I mentioned before that sometimes a solicitor can be litigating a claim for 5-10 years. So I guess in our kind of business is built in a lot of work where we might speak to a potential claimant when the child is 4 years old, right? Yeah. And maybe mum and dad are really struggling with the mortgage, and they're not making ends meet. You know, we will happily sit down with them for as long as they need, just talk through their issues, kind of point them in the right direction. And we don't charge them anything for that. It's just kind of a rapport building piece. And then it might be 6 years later that family then receive their claim. Because they've spoken to us for 3, 4, 5, 6 times over the years, when they receive £2 million for their child, the first person they're going to want to speak to is us. So, you know, there's a lot of that built into the business, not expecting them to end up as clients, but knowing that if we're out there and we're providing a lot of value to people, that eventually there'll be a percentage that will end up coming back to us.
Very much that giving of service, that giving of content, that giving of help, and in the hope that one day it might come back to you. And more often than not, it tends to, because people think, well, yeah, you know, Jason was really great to me during that period. And interestingly, because obviously you joined Irwin Mitchel during lockdown, which has been a bit of atrocious. So you've had a lot of time on your hands. And what I've noticed and seen is that you've started to embrace social media, personal branding. And YouTube being one of those areas as well. And it's really great for me because I get to sit back, and although I've got lots of connections and followers that I from Instagram and from LinkedIn through the years of building building a network, it's great to see some of the financial planners start to, you know, put their head up and sort of say, look, I'm here, you know. And it's amazing when it happens because it totally raises your profile. You know, your profile is certainly raised a lot higher than loads of financial planners, quite simply by investing in a bit of video content, pictures, posts, and all that type of stuff. So you've been given a bit of freedom by the looks of it to do that underneath Irwin Mitchel. Just tell us about that. Why did you start making videos, putting them on YouTube, offering financial coaching and help to those who need it?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that my compliance department will probably want to say, that anything I'm putting up on social media is very much myself.
Yep.
So, it was important to have that conversation, but as I'm sure anyone who works for any kind of larger company, if it was under the Irwin Mitchel branding, it would be everything would need to be checked by compliance. Obviously, I'm really aware of the line, so I'm not ever concerned about that anything that I'm saying in any of my content is advice, but it's definitely coming from me personally. But I think that actually is kind of what I want to be doing anyway, because it is, like you mentioned, the term personal brand. And I think especially with where our industry has come from, you know, you see a headshot on a glossy website, and you know it can be really hard to know who that person is as an actual person, and people buy people at the end of the day. So, you know, for me, I just you've got a bit more time around the house than you would if you're doing a commute every day and that sort of thing. And I just felt like it was going to be a really good way to get my face out there for clients who potentially are thinking of coming to see me. They get a bit of a snapshot of that beforehand. They kind of know who they're going to be talking to. They can either buy into me or not, but at least we kind of cover that. It gives them that little bit of insight, I suppose. And I think I think that's been growing in importance over the years anyway. And I think, I think the whole COVID situation has obviously accelerated that. And I've just been really enjoying it. I think it's like you said, it's interesting how you start to, and it's early days for me, but I think you start to create these kind of real online networks. The Social Network documentary, I don't know if you've seen, not Social Network, Social Dilemma documentary's been on Netflix. And I think there's a lot of stigma about it. And I think the problem is that often when we're on social media, you just you scroll. But I found it really interesting to be on the other side where you're actually using it for something purposeful. You're thinking, what do people want to see? What could I put out there that people will find useful? You get that immediate feedback through the analytics and stuff like that. So yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
Cool. So, okay, I've noticed that you've started to embrace YouTube, and something that I'm looking at I'm sort of on the outside. I'm looking in. I put my podcasts on there. I don't really do much around the keyword research. I just put it on there as another place where someone can watch it. So I haven't done much in respect of the keyword research and making sure that it's being found. However, I've built a list of content ideas. I want to record videos and I want to put them on YouTube. Now I could do that, put all those videos on YouTube, and they won't get found.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to ensure that all that energy and effort that you put into your video is useful, is worthwhile? What are you doing to help you get your videos found?
So I guess they're not getting found too much yet, I guess is the first thing to say.
Well, you had one last week that's got 799 views in a week. I think that's
I suppose that's in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty small fry stuff. But I think that's okay, and that's kind of part of it. And I think that's why it's important whenever I get quite obsessed with things when I'm going head first into them. So I've been doing a lot of research, watching a lot of YouTube videos, doing a lot of reading, and a big part of what the YouTube algorithm kind of rewards is consistency. So it's almost like you have to stick through these early stages where you're not getting a lot of views, because you can understand it from their perspective, right? At the end of the day, they want people staying on YouTube as much as possible. So if you drop a video today and then you don't do another one until February next year, that's not building an audience, that's not building a connection where people are going to spend a lot of time on YouTube. So it is early stages, and I guess where I'm at the moment with it is doing that keyword research. I'm doing quite a bit of that. I use this tool called TubeBuddy, which kind of looks into the analytics of what people are looking for online, and it's really just about finding the way people are asking questions, and finding where you can potentially fit into that. So an example, the most recent video I put up is just about ISAs. So what is an ISA? What are the different types of ISA? Benefits, pros and cons, stuff like that. If I titled that video ISAs Explained, no one is ever going to find me, because there is, Martin Lewis, there's, a load of much more famous people than me who are going to rank higher. What I found was doing that research is, if I titled that, which is the best ISA for me, that is a search term that people are searching for, but there's not as many permeations of that title for the title of the video. So actually, if you type in which ISA is best for me, I come up number one on the list of your YouTube search results. So it's just basically about finding the ways that people are asking their questions online, typing their questions, and then trying to match your video to that. And
so being competitive, looking at the competitors and say you can't win against Martin Lewis if you're picking the top question that's asked on Google, for example.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's about being smart with how you it's all about the title, isn't it? On YouTube,
it's all about the title. The description and stuff is important as well. Basically, for all of these social media platforms, I'm realizing you've just got to play their game. They've all got certain things that they want to do, they want you to do, and it all basically comes back to the fact they want people spending more time on their platform. So again, with YouTube, they prioritize in the search results videos that are over 10 minutes, because if you're watching a 2-minute video, you've got what you need, you're off YouTube. If you've got a 10-minute video, even if the person gets bored halfway through, they've still watched 5 minutes rather than 2. So it's about not waffling, because people are going to leave then anyway, but it's about finding those things where you've got enough content that you can get into it in a reasonable level of detail.
So YouTube can obviously then sell advertising space as well, can't they? So the longer,
that's what it comes down to,
the more advertising space that they can do. So obviously you got about 250 subscribers now, haven't you? You've got to hit 1,000, didn't you, before you can start monetizing it?
Yeah. I think it's 1,000. It's 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours as well. So the subscribers is one thing, but the 4,000 hour amount, that's 240,000 minutes. That's a lot of time.
What's your end game with it? Are you planning? Are you just doing it for a bit of fun as well, or are you just doing it to raise your profile, or are you trying to do it to monetize it? What's your sort of end game on it?
So for me, the monetizing side of things is definitely not the number one objective with it. I think it is just that profile raising. So, for me, I just want to. I would love it if I had a big enough profile where you've got people coming to me and asking questions. And again, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's like, I would love to be able to have 20 conversations a week with different people that have found me via social media or found me via YouTube, provided a lot of value to all those people, being able to help them with those questions, and then on the hope that one or two of them might actually become financial planning clients of the firm. So in a lot of ways, I see it as an extension of the old school networking. And I think it's this shift. Advisors would join golf clubs, they'd join tennis clubs, they'd, go to networking events, they'd join BNI, what's it called?
Breakfast clubs, isn't it?
Yeah, stuff like that. We can't do that anymore. And I think that's becoming less popular anyway. And for me, this is just the same thing. It's just a really wide networking type of thing, really.
So you make some videos, you cut them up, you use them on different platforms. You use your Instagram, you're using your Facebook, aren't you? You're using Facebook or not?
I got Instagram, because it's owned by Facebook. You can have it so that anything you post on Instagram automatically feeds to Facebook. So I'm not spending a lot of time on that, just because I don't really use Facebook myself anyway. But it's interesting because the different platforms, like Instagram, for example, I could put out something like a video about pensions that I spent a lot of time on. Put the headings in, put the titles in, and like no one really gives a shit. And then I post a picture of like my son falling asleep as we're pulling into the school car parking lot, and people absolutely go mental. Well, relatively speaking, I get a lot more traction on that. So I think, again, that's kind of been reinforcement to me that, putting the content around financial planning is important, but actually people care more about who you are. They kind of expect that you know what you're doing when it comes to a pension. But they want to know, can I sit down with this guy and have a chat with him for an hour and feel comfortable to talk about my money?
I think Instagram as well is about lifestyle, isn't it? So Instagram is more lifestyle and quick digestion of information. So someone wants to know, how can I make some money out of an ISA? They want to know in 60 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
LinkedIn's, it's this funny one. You've got to pick your approach on different platforms. And it's about time, isn't it? Like, it takes time to create these videos. It takes time to create the videos. It takes time to research the keywords and everything. Then you've got to repurpose it and repackage it for different platforms. It can be bloody exhausting managing your own social media, let alone what you're saying about the more you put out there, the better you get, the more questions you get. Now, 95% of those questions are going to be really annoying because like you'll get approached by lots of people who you can't do anything to make money for yourself. Do you know what I mean? If you're doing this to try and make money, it's a tough old gig trying to build a following, because people want information for free. So you've got to work out a way to answer those questions and monetize it, which is why the advertising, etc., on YouTube is so good, because you can monetize those questions. So if people are asking you the same question over and over again, make a video of it. And hopefully the more you can respond, you can point them in the direction of videos, and hopefully it helps other people with the same things. But I found using social media really useful as a business. We push it quite hard at Recruit UK. I always have done. In the bulk, we get a lot of business on an internal basis, sorry, not on an internal basis, inbound from putting ourselves out there on social media. Yesterday I had 3 people contact me. I'm looking for a job and 2 job opportunities. All I've done is put a video, and I hadn't even put a video out that day, I don't think. So it's just, and what I found with LinkedIn as well is when you put content out there, it stays out there. So it's out there. So I keep getting likes and shares of stuff that I put out there, and it's been out there for weeks. I've just found
I don't know if I'm sold on LinkedIn. I don't know. Because I went through a phase where I was putting a lot out there, and I don't know if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. He's all about LinkedIn, and he's always pumping it up. And I don't know. It's an interesting one, because I think you get a lot more organic reach there. A lot more people will see what you put out there. But I'm not sure whether the people, there's less potential as a financial planner anyway. There seems to be less interest in a potential client relationship. It tends to be because I think everybody's on there kind of to promote their own business. Whereas if you go on something like Instagram or YouTube, people are there to learn about things that will help them personally. So yeah, I
Like a
mean, it's
learning
obviously
platform.
working for a lot of people, but for me, I'm not sure.
LinkedIn needs to be a combination of both. You need to build your front, what I would call your front connections. So your first connections.
Yeah.
You need to build that up. So if you're building any content that the relevant people are seeing it, you shouldn't be accepting everybody's LinkedIn request. You should really be in like super duper niche on your audience. So if my audience is financial planners, power planners, etc., I should really be building those audiences. Because the problem is, if people start liking your stuff, which is outside of the market that you're looking to target, then it starts to get shifted into their market and not the market that you put. So I put a video out recently, you may have seen it, about the end of life planning guy. Now I put it out there, and loads of his mates have liked it, but they're not in the financial planning space. When I look at the analytics, it's very few financial planners have actually watched it.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? So you've got to be quite specific with it, but also it's about using the messaging system as well. So again, financial planners are so not using LinkedIn properly. They see it as a, I mean, like, you know who your clients are on there, okay, what jobs they do, how much they're probably earning, where they live, everything about them. And it's just like, you just, I don't think financial planners are using it in the right way. So if as a recruiter, we use it like, we pay for recruiter accounts. So messaging is really, really key, and automating your messages as well. You know, sending out or using an automated messaging service like LinkedIn Helper or something along those lines is really useful. Building first connections, but also engaging with those connections when you've actually brought them on board. Definitely underutilized LinkedIn by financial planners for new business generation. I got there's a girl that I use called Paolo Forsberg. And she's ex private banker, but she represents financial planners and helps them generate leads, but through automated messaging systems. So really, really good, really useful. Jason, listen, I appreciate your time today. It's been lovely talking to you. Lovely to learn about the clinical negligence and PI side there at Irwin Mitchel, because I think it's a really interesting route for anybody getting into financial planning. You know, there are different avenues you can go down, and clinical negligence PI is certainly one of them. And Irwin Mitchel is certainly at the top of the tree when it comes to that type of business and that type of work. So thanks for telling us a little bit about your journey from Australia as well to the UK. You know, I like the fact that you said sometimes you've got to leave your ego at the door. And I think it's something that we can all do. You know, we think we should have it straight away, but you've got to kind of step back a little bit and play the game. And eventually it will come. I mean, it's not easy to get into the likes of Irwin Mitchel, Jason. You know, it's like with many a person we put across to them and a failed interview. So it's not an easy task. So you're obviously doing the right things and they've got the right experience.
Managed to sneak through the door.
Yeah. Well, it's Andrew. That's because we were representing you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Jason, thanks so much for your time today, mate.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Sam.